Bom, vocês estão vendo assim, eu não pareço nem um pouco o Filipe, né? Eu sou mais bonito que ele, mas ele não está aqui hoje, está em Nova York, então a gente pode falar mal dele. O Filipe queria estar aqui, de verdade. Esse é um grande evento aqui. A gente tem vocês aqui, mas a gente tem vários colegas também que estão no YouTube, né? É. Então tá lá no YouTube. Eu tenho certeza que vai mais gente chegar, porque o tema hoje é muito importante. Nós temos aí nos últimos anos discutido como é que a gente consegue trazer conteúdo com profissionais como o Peter. Eu vou deixar o Sérgio apresentar o Peter e a minha amiga aqui, né, Lígia. Então, acho que essa é uma grande oportunidade. Nós eu e alguns outros colegas que já trabalhou em multinacional, a gente sempre teve uma oportunidade em algum momento, em algum lugar, em algum evento da empresa, né, a gente ter essa oportunidade de estar falando com pessoas como os profissionais que vão estar aqui hoje. E falando desses temas, então eu estou muito feliz que a gente começou, e eu já falei com a Lígia que né, a gente tem que continuar com isso, porque é importante. Eu acho que o Brasil hoje é muito grande, tem um papel grande na geopolítica, e a gente precisa garantir que a gente tem aqui também os conhecimentos necessários em qualquer mercado, né? Ok? Então, muito obrigado por estarem aqui. Aos que estão via YouTube também, muito obrigado. Da próxima nós vamos arranjar um espaço aqui. O Sérgio falou que vai abrir aqui, né, Sérgio, para a gente colocar mais gente aqui pessoalmente. Bom, não fala isso para o Pires que ele fica louco. Gente, olha, nós temos aí pela frente alguns eventos. Eu queria começar, na verdade, agradecendo todos os nossos mantenedores. Se puder voltar lá o slide. Ótimo. Vocês viram que esse número de mantenedores aqui tem aumentando de membros corporativos. A gente fica muito feliz com isso, e não é só a quantidade aqui, a gente também está falando da qualidade das empresas que estão se associando a nós. A gente quer manter isso, mas quer manter com esse nível de qualidade, né? Então, quero agradecer e fico muito feliz com isso. A gente aumentou muito isso aqui nos últimos anos. Não foi por minha causa, né? Tem que dar o crédito para o pessoal do comercial e para o Pires. Se a gente puder ir para os eventos, nós temos feito eventos de muita boa qualidade, gente. Para vocês que são associados, eu diria, por exemplo, nem estão aqui, mas a gente tem um da Comissão Técnica de Controladoria, liderado aqui pela minha amiga Roberta. Os dois são seu? Ah, que legal, que bom. É que eu não consigo ler, viu, cara? Não é boa. Estou sem o óculos, tirei para a foto. A gente tem feito uma jornada nas comissões técnicas, especialmente na Comissão Técnica de Controladoria e na de Impostos, que eu diria para vocês que é imperdível. Eu acho que o pessoal também de mercado de capitais e tesouraria também tem feito, mas por que eu estou relacionando a de controladoria e de tax? Porque são assuntos que estão acontecendo agora. A gente está falando de reforma tributária que está sendo implementada este ano, né? Começa esse ano. Nós estamos falando de uma série de mudanças nas regras contábeis, e eu acho que a discussão lá é de altíssimo nível. Então, vocês que estão nos cargos aí de C-level ou que têm, vamos dizer, equipes, incentivem eles a participarem do IBF, porque vale a pena. Eu participo de todas as reuniões da Roberta, de todas as reuniões do time como todo, quando posso, pessoalmente, inclusive. Então, nós temos essas duas aqui. Dia 20 de maio, nós temos uma reunião da Comissão de Controladoria. No dia 27 é um happy hour. Esse aqui me vale muito, não só pelo conteúdo, mas também por uma oportunidade de networking. Okay? Bom, eu não quero mais tomar tempo de vocês. Eu sei que hoje o tema é All Performers. I'm very curious about that, Peter, honestly. You know, Peter is from UK, but lives in California. Netherlands. Yeah, Netherlands, of course. I was talking to him, and now I worked for Philips for 23 years. And I used to be, my last 8 years there, I used to go to Netherlands once per trimester, per quarter, no? And most of the time in Amsterdam, but I also went to those other cities, no? We always found an excuse to be in another place, no, to really know Netherlands very well. And I was saying good things about Netherlands. I'm a lucky guy, no? So, thank you, man, for being here with us. Okay, Sergio, floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have this event here for all this. It was organized by the certification team as a part of the certification program. We at EBEF, I will not pronounce in English, EBEF is EBEF, okay? The Beth is the Beth. That's it. And we were glad to extend this not only to the certified persons. We have CFOs, controllers, and treasurers that are part of the program, but we opened to all members of EBEF. So I'm glad you are here, physically or online. I will tell my friends that are online that unfortunately they will not receive a book. Everybody that's here were gifted with a book from the authors. Thank you very much for your kindness. So later on you can get it signed by the authors too. And before I enter our subject tonight, I would like to also I would like to mention that we also have, besides all the events that João mentioned, which are great, we still have time to participate in the Prêmio Revelação em Finanças, Finance Award. So there is still time for you and your teams to subscribe to that. We will close these inscriptions on June 1st, but you don't have to worry to deliver the actual work by that date. You have a couple more weeks to do on June 19th, so there's some time, and between that there will be a mentorship for the people that are interested in participating. On September 1st, there will be the oral defense. So the ones that are five were pre-selected and 3 will be selected, and these 3 will present to a board of about 40 executives. Some of them are here with us. And the final ceremony, we will recognize the winners on October 28. So that's it. There's time. Please do it. Also, please, if you like this event, the ones that are not certified yet, go talk to EBEF and get certified. We have some friends here that just recently certified. My friend there from the treasury of IBM just certified and was able to come here, get priority on those seated places here. Thanks. And let's go to our main event. John said it's whole performers, a nova fronteira da liderança. But I'll continue in English. The corporate world was built on the high-performer model, disciplined, results-oriented, driven by metrics. This profile delivered growth, but today it carries costs that no balance sheet can hide. We are most here, finance and account, we know exactly what it means. Our hidden costs on our balance sheet. Burnout, short-sighted decisions, and organizations that have lost resilience and purpose. In an environment of non-linear complexity, where systemic risks are as critical as human variables, high performance in isolation is no longer enough. We need to go ahead, move ahead. Today, we will explore the concept of the whole performer, the next stage of leadership, integrating systemic vision, relational intelligence, and the ability to operate in uncertain scenarios with clarity and presence. For CFOs and board members, the central question is straightforward. What are the hidden costs of perpetuating a leadership model that has already reached its limits? So that's what we'll cover tonight. So I would like to thank you. I would like to call Ligia Zottini to come here, to join us here. We have also at corner Peter Mary. So thank you. I will talk about a little bit about the background, their background. Lidia Zottini is a future scenarios researcher, founder of Voicers, 3 times TEDx speaker, and master graduate in leadership and performance studies. With 20 years of experience in technology and 25 years in education, she has explored from within the cultures of high performance in one of the most iconic organizations in the corporate world. Her work focuses on the future of work, the emerging values of new generations, and the creation of organizations capable of attracting and developing next generation leaders. She's a recognized speaker in both Brazil and internationally. Thank you, Lidia.
It's awesome to be here, Sergio. Thank you.
And Peter Mary, he is a PhD. He's a globally recognized expert in evolutionary leadership, complexity, and consciousness. He is the author of Evolutionary Leadership, Evolution, and Leading from the Field, as well as co-founder of Weird Technologies and Ubiquity University. His works explores coherence between humans and the field, as well as leadership within complex systems. And he has worked with companies, governments, NGOs, and academic institutions around the world. Thank you, Peter. So I will pass the word to Ligia.
Okay, everyone, it's an honor to be here. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I think you need to listen Peter first, then understand why I'm here. But basically, we met last year in the UK after 10 years of doing what I'm doing nowadays, which is bringing future scenario and corporate education for different industry. Me and Tanya, my partner here in New Humans, which is the line of study that took us to UK. We work with the different stages of consciousness, different system values inside the companies, and we used to say that we share the same space, but not the same time. In the same company, we have teams, still in the 90s, and in the same company, there are teams and leaders in 2050, because they are forward thinkers. So our goal is to balancing the visions and bringing coherency to reach the goals, the performance, and the way of leading. So we were looking for better ways to have the education, the corporate education we are doing nowadays in Brazil. Then we met Peter in a castle of 1,000 years in the same family. So it's a very past space with many layers of present and very oriented to the future. Nowadays, the reference is where his company is. And I will let Peter talk, then I come back in the end and see and tell you what's the correlation between our research, our education here, and everything that Peter is working, and why we developed a book together. For the ones who are my bosses, Fabi and Joca, you're gonna find my history there. So when we met, he said, what is all about your studies and research about high performance? And I said, I was considered one high performance at IBM. But in a moment, I need to leave. And this is something that is repeating. Some of us left 10 years ago. Part of us stayed. But the ones who is doing innovation inside the companies, they are similar people. And they are not more high performance. They are already whole performers. But I did not know that was the name. So he took my journey from IBM to Voicers, and he was pointing the concept of how we move from high performance to whole performer. So you're going to find yourselves there too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lidia, and thank you, Sergio and João, for the invitation, and Ibeth. You know, Sergio kind of said it all, so I think we can all go home. You know? That's okay. In fact, you have Lidia and and Tanya and Jenny to thank for me being here, because I actually completed my mission for being in Brazil this afternoon when I managed to find a Brazilian football shirt with Casemiro on the back. And I'm kind of done, you know, but they said, no, you still have to give this talk. I'm kind of, oh, okay. No, joking apart, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, my son is very happy. He chose the away shirt, by the way, this beautiful new blue shirt that they have for the away shirt. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're at a very interesting moment in time, and it's been fascinating over this week talking to the various audiences how much this has resonated. You know, I was saying in there to Zhao and others, you know, I've been telling this story for 20 years, and yet suddenly everyone's kind of, oh, that's really interesting. I'm kind of, oh, at last, you know. It's something to do with the timing and this concept that just emerged when Lydia and I were having breakfast in Brasilia in November. So like the book was written between November and now. We literally came off the press last week. And we were just talking about it, and it just flopped out of my mouth, which was, it's like moving from high performers to whole performers. And both of us got these kind of shivers, you know, and we were kind of, that's a good term. And so that's what led to the book. I think we've said enough about ourselves for now. So this is what we're going to cover this evening, because first of all, the critical piece is understanding human development. That's the kind of missing puzzle piece, as it were, to help us understand what's actually going on at the moment, particularly among the younger generations, but also other generations who are developing a very different relationship to work. What the world is demanding of us today, I probably don't need to spend much time on that with all of you, because I'm sure you're all very aware of that. What high performers have brought us and what limits we're bumping up against now, and then what the promise is of the whole performers. So the context of human and societal development. So this is the key piece that underpins it all, is basically, and it's kind of obvious really, but people develop and societies develop. And we accept that, you know, a tree grows from a seed into a mature tree. We accept that we move from kind of childhood to adolescence to adulthood to old age. But our actual mindsets, our inner worlds, the way we understand the world and make sense of the world also grows and evolves. And this is what, you know, academics across many different disciplines have researched and called developmental psychology. You know, there's many different lines of development that they've explored, but it's been missing in our conversations about how our worldviews actually evolve. And that when you see the map, and hopefully you'll recognize it, then it becomes very clear as to what's going on with these kind of limits that we're reaching with high performers. The general directionality of growth in this sense is increasing complexity. And it's obvious really, because each new stage of development transcends and includes the previous stages, right? So you're wrapping in more. So as we evolve our thinking and our worldviews, we're able to take into account more of reality. It's as simple as that, right? So general directionality, increasing complexity. But these worldviews in us, they don't evolve in a vacuum. They evolve because we're facing new life conditions. We're like any being in nature, right? When Charles Darwin talked about survival of the fittest, he didn't mean survival of the strongest. He meant survival of the entity or the being that fits best in its ecology. That's what he meant. If you get out of sync with your ecology, you either evolve or you die. That's the rule of nature, basically. And we're facing the same thing. You know, our mindsets evolve as we face different life conditions. So there's a dance between life conditions and our coping mechanisms, our ways of coping with reality that we call value systems in the spiral dynamics model. And when you get a misfit, when let's say the world changes fast and our worldview or our value systems don't evolve, that's when you get stress and ultimately burnout. Because as an individual, we can't see how we fit anymore. We can't make sense of it anymore. And our body, it's a biological thing, winds us down because it says you can't contribute at the moment. You know, take a break until you can come back and fit and contribute again and be kind of one of the fittest because you fit into your ecology, right? So there's this basic kind of concept of development. The particular model we're going to look at that informs the whole performers model is the spiral dynamics. And the researcher who did the original research, a man called Clare Graves, was around at the same time as Maslow. So I guess a lot of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And Clare Graves had a lot of discussion with Maslow because Maslow had this closed pyramid. And Clare Graves said, no, it's an open-ended system because each new set of solutions we come up with has embedded within them the seeds of the next set of problems. Right? So you come up with a solution like the Industrial Revolution, solves a whole bunch of problems, but there's a bunch of problems that are waiting to emerge as that solution matures. So you then have to develop a next level of complexity to deal with those problems, right? So it just keeps going. And at the end of his life, apparently Maslow agreed with Clare Graves that indeed it wasn't a kind of closed pyramid, it was actually an open-ended system that just kept going. So very briefly, because I'm going to go into detail on some of these basic value systems, beige is the obvious one, you know, the survival, got to stay alive, first thing. And these are kind of, from baby up to adults, you know, we move through these stages, or these stages emerge in us. The second one here is all about safety and belonging. So that's the child up until about 2 or 3. And these two here are really pre-rational. So we're not sitting around thinking, you know, the child actually experiences themselves as one with the mother and the world around them. They have no sense of separate self. What emerges here for the first time is, in psychological terms, we call the ego, which just means the sense of separate self. So it's like, oh, there's me and there's the other. So that only happens around the age of 3 or so. And that's when, you know, your young child starts to go me for the first time and no, you know, and starts to poke the dog in the eye because it's like, ooh, I can have an effect on the world, right? There's me in the world. And so that's kind of an important developmental stage because suddenly I become aware of myself and my individual identity and my relationship to the world around me. Now at that point, I'm aware then of the family, of the society, of other things, and I develop the set of rules that are needed for me to fit in to my context, right? So there's this, okay, what are the rules I have to play by to fit in to the context? So we were talking earlier about like predict and control models, or very kind of rule-based systems emerge out of the conformist self value system. This is more the kind of Wild West, as it were, value systems, because everyone's out there just expressing themselves and doing their own thing. And this is the rule of law that emerges here. Hierarchical systems. This where our religions evolved in the context of this value system. Right? There was somebody at kind of the big guy at the top, and then the kind of hierarchy of priests and stuff moving down to the peasants at the bottom. And of course we see these in a lot of our old organizations as well that were structured in this very hierarchical form. Now you're starting to see maybe a pattern here, like why we have the warm colors here and these cool colors here. These are all about the expression of the self. This is where you need to go out and express your individuality. But after a while it gets a bit lonely and you need to work out what your connection is to the collective. So it's a dance the whole time between me expressing myself and me fitting in to a context. So after you've played by the rules for a while, you want to kind of get out and work it out for yourself. So this is the emergence of the achiever self. This was like the Enlightenment, where suddenly with the telescope and the microscope, we didn't have to believe the priest anymore. We could go out and research it for ourselves. So this was the birth of the scientific revolution. The whole kind of industrial revolution came into this context, the whole free market economy and everything, because this is all about the individual and their potential. The individual being able to go out there, be the best, develop their highest potential. This is what the high performer emerged out of, this value system here. Okay. But after a while, you know, if you've kind of been in this world for a bit, it starts to get lonely again. And so you swing back to a value system that's about connection. And it's like, well, I've achieved a huge amount, but I'm still not happy. And that's the kind of tension that emerges as you discover your inner world of emotions and you start to feel, you know, I'd rather dedicate my time to feeling happier and having more connection with other people than earning more money, for example, right? And it was, who were we talking to? It was Michel Alcoforado, who was sharing some data at the talk at SWILE. And he was showing how across Latin America, work was now priority number 5 for people. Money was 4, family was 1, mental health was 2, physical health was 3. So people are kind of, you know, this is why there's a whole generation that's saying, you know, the younger generation who's been through this fast, what happens is as we evolve, you know, we move to the leading edge and then we work hard to develop the next value systems, and then the next generation just goes and then reaches their edge. So that younger generation is coming through and they're already developing the sensitive self in the Gen Zs. That's why they're saying, you know, I'm not going to sacrifice my mental health and well-being, this kind of inner state that I want to, you know, I want to feel some sense of harmony in myself. I'm not going to kind of live a world of stress. And so I'm not going to go into an environment that's purely kind of driven by the achiever self. So as that kind of system comes online, it brings in a whole bunch of intelligences, what we'll look at in a bit. But in the data, the really interesting one was this integral self that emerges. And that's why Claire Graves talked about a first tier of systems and a second tier of systems, because there was a quantum leap with the integral self in terms of ability to deal with complexity. Remember, we said the general directionality was increasing complexity. When you get to the integral self, suddenly your ability to complex problem solve basically goes through the roof. And the main reason is that each of these value systems is kind of immersed in its own world and believes it's right. So, you know, blue believes, you know, orange believes this is really old-fashioned, all the rules and stuff, give me the freedom to do what I want to do. It believes these guys are a bunch of hippies, you know, not going to get anything done. You know, these guys think these are a bunch of materialist sellouts, you know, where's your soul? And so they're all fighting, you know, because they've got their own world view. But yellow, for the first time, sees the whole picture and understands that each of these value systems have a role to play in the whole. And it's not caught up in its own identity anymore. It's concerned with how do we pull it all together to solve the major problems that we're facing. Because green has brought in the care and concern for what's happening in the world, for environmental issues, for social issues. They all emerge with green. But green cares about harmony and well-being and doesn't actually do much, whereas yellow kind of starts to go, okay, maybe we should do something about this, and tries to pull it all together. We'll go into some more detail about these in the end. And turquoise takes the kind of, yellow really reaches the limit of the rational mind of what we can do, and turquoise realizes we need to develop other ways of sensing to be able to make sense of the world as a whole. So that's the kind of, in short, that's the basic journey. And there are, as I said, there are many different developmental maps, but they all essentially go through the same stages. Just one is about interpersonal capacities, one is about emotional capacities, but they all describe essentially the same developmental journey. So I've found this a very useful framework, which comes from Ken Wilber, who's the most translated American philosopher. And he was trying to make sense of all the different theories that exist. And he ended up kind of plotting them on these quadrants. He said, look, we've got a kind of outer world that we can see and measure at the individual level. That's people's behavior, their physical organism. You know, you can measure it and analyze it without talking to the human being. And systems and structures that we can build and look at and, you know, see it all, map it out very clearly. But then you've also got this interior reality, which is how people make sense of the world, what actually motivates them to behave in this way. And if we just focus on trying to change behavior, but we don't understand the motivation, it's going to be pretty hard. And then we've got the web's culture, which is the invisible side of the collective. So what we're really looking at is what happens when you get a misfit between any of these quadrants. So if you've got individuals with certain value systems here, and yet you've got a culture in your company, or you've got reward systems in your company that doesn't match the value systems of the individual, they're likely to leave, right? Or they'll start to get stressed and burn out. So these different value systems express themselves through these different quadrants. And what we're looking at really is the relationship between these. And this is evolving. The individuals are evolving because they're facing the complexity, and it's triggering these new intelligences. But can the companies create the conditions for these individuals to actually contribute? That's the big question. So I'll kind of move through this fairly quickly because I think you're all familiar with this, right? Hypercomplexity. That word came out of the IBM 2012 CEO study, you know, where they kind of interview all these CEOs and they distill one word. So 2012, the word was hypercomplexity. They had to invent a new word. It's basically the CEO saying, we don't have a clue how to manage this reality. You know, right? It's hyper complex. But what they did say, if you remember, I don't know if you remember that report, but that's when the whole kind of soft skills thing came to the surface, because they were the things we need are communication, collaboration, creativity, all the things you don't get taught at business school, and all the human qualities, right, that are messy, that you don't see on a spreadsheet. So we're facing all this complexity, all these issues that have accelerated over the last few decades, creating conditions of complexity we've never faced before, in what one might call a moment of non-linear change. So linear change is like gradual change going on. We can kind of maybe predict a little bit what's going to happen. But the nature of emergence is that you can't see what's going to emerge next from the place that you are now. Now, it's happened before. We've seen these different eras. You know, you've probably heard people say we're not in an era of change, we're in a change of eras, right? Which is this non-linear change moment, which requires a very different form of leadership and organization because the complexity is increasing then exponentially. The way I made sense of this in evolutionary leadership was to say, well, look, we develop a whole set of solutions to problems here. Remember I said the seeds of the next set of problems are already embedded. They start to mature here. And at that point, people see that the old system is breaking down. It's not working anymore. So your innovators, maybe your early adopters, right, they start to innovate under the radar. The old system has to keep the lights on. So they've got to, you've got to keep the show running. But you know it's not working. And yet the new isn't mature enough to take over. So it's what the systems thinkers call a chaos point. Now, chaos in the original Greek actually means subtle order. Subtle order. Because within the chaos are the patterns of what's trying to emerge next. So when the caterpillar hangs itself up in the cocoon, what emerges in the caterpillar are what the biologists call imaginal cells. These are the cells that are imagining the form of the butterfly, right? And the first thing that happens is that the organism of the caterpillar, the immune system, attacks the imaginal cells because they see them as being a foreign entity. And it's only when those cells start to connect up to each other that the caterpillar kind of surrenders, as it were. The body dissolves, and that becomes the food for the emergent butterfly to then come to the next stage as a classic kind of example of emergence. The nature of this, you may be familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's work and the tipping point. Right? This is all tipping point stuff. You can't predict when this is going to happen. All you can do is put in place the conditions. Right? So we're in one of those moments again, but we're starting to see the pattern. If you follow, we go back to the spiral and you follow the different stages of development, we can see what's coming. So high performers, as I said, that they've really emerged out of this achiever self value system. And these are all things that I'm sure you'll be very familiar with, but the kind of qualities of the achiever self, achieve, approve, and win, like go for the results, very rational, show me the data, rational problem solving, very good at entrepreneurism, strategy, at being innovative, at collecting data. In the workplace, they love a challenge and opportunity, do need autonomy, do need recognition, and really drive kind of progress and productivity. However, the achiever self can become overly individualistic because their identity is linked to their ability to achieve goals and targets and be recognized for them. They'll be after their status and growth, sometimes at any cost, and that cost can include well-being, relationships, and purpose and meaning. You lose track of why you're actually doing it. So the high performers, as an expression of that value system, have contributed, to that capacity to really focus on goals and execute and get stuff done, focus on measurable results. So the value system before, the blue, order-driven, was all about faith. Because the guy at the top, says it, then I should believe it's true, right? Whereas the orange value system wants to see the data. Show me the data. Where's God? That kind of question, right? Show me the data. The high performers have created enormous amount of value through productivity, efficiency, wealth creation, providing opportunities for people, really developing clarity of targets and accountability, lots of energy in the system, focus for change and performance. And really, this value system is what's built our modern organizations and markets, right? It's managed to solve problems at scale, be very collaborative, get beyond the pure hierarchical system, and has, encouraged people to really go for it. It's the kind of American dream, right? You can make it yourself, the self-made person, as it were. So, but remembering that this is a stage of development, right? And stages, they reach their maturity, and they have within them the seeds of the next set of problems. So high performance may have worked for a while, but the complexity of the world has increased, and it's requiring a new kind of level of complexity, and that's why we're bumping up against these limits. Also probably very familiar to you, particularly if you're in HR. Burnout, stress, and exhaustion, because it's drive, and yet the world has changed, so the stuff that we did before doesn't work, but we're still kind of trying to push for those targets. Our own identity is tied to winning, so we've kind of mixed up our identity of who we are with our role, as it were, in the companies. And we neglect rest, relationships, and our inner life because those require us to slow down. And yet the high performer, as we all know, is fast moving. Culturally, competition can override trust and collaboration. People are valued for their output and their status, not so much as who they are. And because people are afraid of not winning, of failing, then their learning is going to narrow, because that takes time. And honesty can also be a cost sometimes, right? Because you want to be seen to win. And so you're going to kind of spin the story a little bit to make sure that that's the picture that comes across. As I think Sergio mentioned, you sacrifice long-term health for short-term results. Complexity is pulled down to what can be measured. I think, Xiao, you said, like, it's the things you can't see on the spreadsheets, right? And yet, Orange is purely focused on the things we can measure. And then the moments of sitting back and reflecting, which is often the moments where the deep insights come in. There's no space for that. And systemically, of course, if you've got winners, you're going to have losers. The growth, economic growth, can come at other costs that somehow can't be accounted for within our measurement systems, which means the organizations also start to lose their resilience, meaning, and ultimately their humanity. So these are some of the things like we're bumping up against, and this is why there's generations now that are refusing to accept these costs, basically, and the companies are struggling, right? Well, what do we do? The whole performers, what we're calling the whole performers, really are an expression of this integral self. Remember I said there was this kind of quantum leap in complexity, an ability to deal with complexity. So let's spend a moment looking at these. The kind of drive of the yellow integral self is to be able to see the system as a whole, connect up the pieces, weave the different parts together into comprehensive solutions, really be able to dive into the complexity, look at the coherence across the various perspectives. It's very good at being able to adapt quickly because it's not attached to its own opinion. It's focused on impact. It sees big challenges, and it's what do we need to do to get stuff done? What pieces need to be pulled together? Can deal with paradox and uncertainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, things moving the speed that they are. And it's very good at seeing patterns within systems and relationships and interdependencies. It's like Orange has the high performer has this blinkers on, like a horse trying to get to the finish line, right? Which means it's not seeing a lot of other dimensions. Yellow has that capacity to sit back and see the bigger system and identify the kind of leverage points or the acupuncture points in the system, which will make a big effect across the whole system. In the workplace, it loves complexity, values autonomy, so it needs to be able to do its own thing, but at the same time is also committed to the collective, to learning, understands that different perspectives have different information that are needed to be able to be pulled together so that you have a bigger picture of what's going on, and values functional collaboration. So not collaboration just to make people happy, but collaboration because you need the diversity to deal with the complexity of the problem that you're facing, right? Very good at kind of integration in terms of strategy and whole systems thinking about the system as a whole. Every value system has its risks and limits, particularly when yellow's emerging early on. Because it's trying to pull together all this information, it can kind of overcomplicate things. It's like, we need the whole picture. And it kind of, that whole picture can be a bit difficult to make sense of sometimes, which also means it can finds it hard to communicate simply with others. By the way, I'm happy to share a PDF of the slides afterwards as well. So that's yellow. This is what we're seeing emerge right now. However, the deal is, remember, these are developmental stages, and you can't skip stages, right? One stage emerges, and then the next stage, and then the next stage, because the next stage informs the previous stage and transforms it to the one after. So the difference between the achiever self and the integral self, and remember these are express self systems, right? They're systems where you're going out trying to impact the world. What makes this that is this, the sensitive self. Okay, and there's no way around that. And so let's dive into this sensitive self, because this is what brings in the intelligences that enables the integral self to be so effective. So the green sensitive self, it's all about connection, empathy, equality, and shared meaning. It develops this need to connect, to care, to include people, values meaningful relationships, authenticity. So, green will see right through any greenwashing, like just won't buy it. It's like, sorry. You say this and you do that. No deal. Develops a great sense of compassion, both for other people and for the rest of life on the planet. Wants to be collaborative and support and help people. Really values fairness, so needs to be seen to be fair. Listening, am I being listened to? And inclusion. Very good at building trust and a sense of belonging and psychological safety. All these things, we heard so much of this at Swile from the HR executives, all these things that people are really desperate for at the moment that they're missing in the current corporate cultures. In a workplace, will really value being involved, participation, cultures that have strong values that they can buy into, teamwork, people appreciating each other, not just kind of killing each other, as it were, because they're trying to get above the other person in their department. Engagement, people-centered leadership, or as one of the guys on the stage at Swile called it, humane leadership, or humane organizations. This is all very beautiful, right? And we probably recognize a lot of this emerging. And a lot of companies have tried to create space for this value system. But because they haven't understood the evolutionary context, it gets stuck. And the reason it gets stuck is because green's primary drive is harmony and well-being, which is fantastic. But it's not really interested in getting anything done. It's interested in making people happy. Okay? And if you have to take a hard decision, you're going to maybe make somebody unhappy. So green will avoid hard decisions and avoid conflict, even though conflict holds information, right, that we need. And because it over-prioritizes harmony and consensus, it can lose effectiveness because it'll avoid decision-making and will be unclear about its boundaries. So this is why businesses who've tried to implement this kind of back down, because suddenly everyone's happier, but no results are getting achieved. No targets are being met because people are sitting around and sharing their emotions, and having these fantastic kind of circles and at last. But they haven't, because they can't see what's coming next, right? They get stuck. And that was the insight really we had at breakfast in Brasilia, was you can't leave it here. You have to anchor it in the yellow, anchor it in the integral self, because that's when you integrate the performer energy with the human intelligences which emerge here, right? The integration of the two. And I'll come back to how we might do that in our organizations. Because what happens when the green sensitive self-value system emerges is a whole bunch of other intelligences come online. So, achiever self and high performer is primarily a cognitive intelligence. But what comes online with the sensitive self is the emotional intelligence, right? I mean, Daniel Goleman was at the Innovation Week, right, this week here. They're still talking about emotional intelligence 30 years after he wrote the book. Right? Oh, meditation's the new thing. Oh, okay. Okay, meditation. Wow. Okay. So okay, great. Well, at least they're talking about it like 30 years later, yeah. So relational intelligence, right? So green brings the capacity to actually build trust and relationship. And we know that when you build that, you build culture, right? And build a culture of trust, which enables information to flow through the organization. You become a lot more conscious of your physical well-being. Remember, it was family, mental health, physical health was the third priority, right? Before money and before work. But this is also more than that. It's a somatic intelligence. It's the gut feeling. You know, all of you as leaders, right? Gut feeling. How often do you actually kind of follow your gut feeling? Probably quite a lot. And yet we don't sit around and, you know, there's no rational justification for it. But a good leader, you know, you just feel these things. And we become a lot more aware and conscious of that and how to use it. And then these intuitive intelligences come online. You know, the insight, the precognition we were talking about, Zhao, before, because you start to see the patterns and you start to get a sense of things emerging. Because this happens when you slow down, right? Not when you speed up. Because when you slow down, the left brain slows down and you create space for the right brain. And the right brain's the side of the brain that connects everything, right? And that can sense things. The left brain's a little bit like AI in the sense that it's rooted in the past. Right? It's analyzing everything, all the past information. The right brain has the capacity to sense the emerging future. Right? But that has to, and what green brings in, the sensitive self, is that ability to slow down and not get caught up in the mind. Right? So you can. This was actually something we were talking about in the CNBC interview this morning, where Marcello asked me, well, if there was one thing you would recommend an executive to do, if they were going to start to become a whole performer, what would it be? And my answer was 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. Basic mindfulness or meditation practice, if they're not doing it yet. Why? Because the moment that you sit, the practice is to notice the mind, to notice the chatter, right? The moment you do that, you're disidentifying with the mind. Right? You can no longer be the mind because suddenly you're witnessing the mind. That's a radical shift because you're not caught up in it anymore. You're not identifying with it. You're sitting back and you're noticing it. Suddenly your system relaxes, your nervous system relaxes, and you start to be able to see the patterns rather than be kind of swimming in what they call the monkey mind, you know, the whole time. So that's when, you know, when you create that kind of space, that's when the insights come in that can be really important strategically in these chaos points, right? In these chaos moments, you're trying to sense the patterns. It's like sitting in the middle of a whirlwind or tornado. You know, you need to sit in the eye of the storm, not get caught up in the tornado or you get pulled out of your center, but just notice. You know, what's going on, what's moving, what's coming through, what do we need to let go of, from a place that, you know, isn't caught up or identified with the past, but is able to just see clearly. And that clear seeing comes, you know, when you introduce these kind of sensitive self competencies. Some of you may have seen this. Have you seen this before? This it was earlier this month. NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang talked about. He was asked, who's the smartest person you've met? And then he went on to talk about what he meant by smart. And it's just great because it's very related to this. Would you mind playing that for us?
Who's the smartest person you've ever met?
Who's the smartest person I've ever met? I can't answer that question. And I know what people are thinking. The definition of smart is somebody who's intelligent, solve problems, technical. But I find that that's a commodity. And we're about to prove that artificial intelligence is able to handle that part easiest.
Right.
Yeah. And so as it turns out, let me give you another example. Everybody thought software programming is the ultimate smart profession. Look what is the first thing that AI is solving. Software programming. And so it turns out that the definition of smart is very different than most people think. I think long-term, the definition of smart and my personal definition of smart is someone who sits at that intersection of being technically astute, but human empathy and and having the ability to infer the unspoken, the around the corners, the unknowables. You know, people who are able to see around corners are truly, truly smart, and their value is incredible. To be able to preempt problems before they show up, just because you feel the vibe, and the vibe came from a combination of data analysis, first principle, life experience, wisdom, sensing other people. That vibe, that I think, that's smart. That I think is going to be the future definition of smart. And that person might actually score horribly on the SAT.
That's the whole performer, right? Right there. He's describing. And when you can see the value system map, we can go back to the slides, then you can see that he's really talking about the integration of that green sensitivity, right? But he's including the performance piece, the orange piece. We're not throwing away high performance. We're saying integrate these human intelligences that will give us whole performance, and your whole performer will outperform your high performer, right? But they'll get a lot done with a lot less effort, because the high performer needs to be busy, needs to show that they're working hard, right? And really important. There's a lot of ego in the high performer. That shift into the green value system and then into yellow, there's a lot of ego that disappears, because it all becomes about doing what needs to be done to solve the major challenges we're facing. Right? That's it, whatever happens. Not about me anymore. It's about the challenges. It's about impact that we're making. And so it doesn't need to run and prove itself anymore, which is the high performer thing, right? It's about pulling together what needs to be done. And a bit of humility comes with it as well, because it realizes it's all so complex. There's no way we can know it all. All we can do is kind of pull together, sense, like he was saying, what's coming, and then try something out and, you know, move our way forward, keep moving with that kind of orange, that high performer energy, but embedded in this broader context. So what happens with yellow, as I said earlier, is that it has access to all the different value systems now. And it can see the importance of all the different value systems. That's why it's called the integral self. So understands that, you know, obviously we need to meet the basic needs, but this kind of subconscious or unconscious need to belong, right, to be part of something. That isn't a rational thing, but that if you build into culture, you'll get immense loyalty from people because they feel at home, you know. At the same time, when you need to act, you need to act. So if you're in the fire brigade, right, and the call comes through, you don't want to sit around to get a consensus decision of, which fire engine shall we take today? And how are you feeling about all of this? No, you need the boss to tell you what to do, and you need to act. So it's about the appropriate value system in the appropriate life conditions, right, in the appropriate context. And that's what yellow understands, is you need to weave them together to do what needs to be done in a certain context. So one thing we could do, maybe somebody here would like to do this, because we actually have the technologies to assess these value systems. We know how to measure these value systems in people. We know how to assess them in cultures. So we could develop a whole performer index where we're able to see, okay, where are these different value systems in the organization and in the people? If we're able to track people's evolution in this way, then we'd avoid the issues we have at the moment with stress and burnout. Because what's happening is when people reach the limits of, when they've been in a high performer culture, right, and they reach the limits of the orange value system, what naturally happens is the green sensitive self starts to come online. And that sensitivity completely fries them in a high performer culture, right? And so what happens is, because it's not being picked up by HR, because they don't understand the development, natural development, these people either leave the company or they burn out or have massive stress, and which is a great loss, because Remember, these people are bringing more complexity into the company, the ability to deal with more complexity. They're potentially your best employees, but to a high performer, it all looks soft, right? They don't understand that it's the next stage of development that's bringing in these intelligences. If we could track, which we could, when people are starting to reach the limits of orange, of the high performer culture, we could create space for them to develop these intelligences without losing this, to integrate them. And we could do that within the companies, so they don't have to burn out, right? And go off on a 2-year sabbatical to India, you know, to develop their empathic collaboration, right? We could actually do it in the companies. We know how to do it. I mean, the work Tanya does, it's all about developing these kind of qualities in people in a way that you could then hold it in the context of this, and people would understand, okay, this is a developmental process, and this is coming after that as well, right? And so as soon as you start to bring these capacities in, this orange value system starts to move into this yellow value system, into this systemic integral self. That's something we could be doing. It would save the companies money, it would save a lot of human suffering, and it would enable us to actually be far more effective at dealing with the challenges we're facing in the world. If you had those intelligences in the team, you know, team held by this integral self, by this whole performer intelligence, then conflict would be generative. So yellow, you know, it doesn't worry about conflict, understands that conflict is actually just information. Tension is information in a system, and things only evolve in tension. Like when you have a tension, it's asking a question. If you collapse the tension, you lose the opportunity to learn. If you can hold the tension and lean into it without being fearful of it, then the kind of insights start to drop in that enable you to transcend the poles and get some kind of breakthrough. So there's a possibility, you know, those possibilities emerge. You understand that you need clear structure and rules and agreements, knowledge about what the boundaries are in the team. You obviously need your performance and your coherence, alignment around what you're doing, and you need to lean into the collective intelligence. So to know that different people in the team have different perspectives, and those perspectives are bringing information that could be really important. It's like a dashboard on the aircraft, right? You don't want to ignore, let's say, the altimeter because, you know, you don't like it. It's a horrible color or something, and suddenly there's a mountain coming and you don't know what height you're flying, right? So it's each person in their roles in the company are like an indicator on the dashboard of your aircraft. And those perspectives, if you're paying attention and you're not kind of caught up in personality issues, right? You're looking for the information that each person is holding, maybe particularly the people who don't speak up so much, right? Who have often been observing a lot what's going on and actually hold an immense wealth of information. So again, that's that green intelligence that is able to respect and understand different perspectives people hold and see how they might contribute to the whole. What that means for our organizations is basically we move from an industrial paradigm of organizations to a more regenerative or organic concept for organizations. It's adaptive, it's developmental, it understands developmental growth, has alignment, so all that diversity is aligned behind shared purpose. It requires a culture of trust, honesty, and psychological safety. That the roles are clear, everyone's role is clear, but there's also the ability to self-organize around those roles quickly around stuff that needs to be done. Swarm-like, there's a lot of kind of stuff now about swarm intelligence, you know, this kind of thing. You know what I mean by swarms? Like flocks of birds and kind of fish and who all move together, etc. Decisions, there's a lot of distributed intelligence, so a lot of the agile governance stuff. You come across agile governance like holacracy and these practices that enable the appropriate decision to be taken at the appropriate level. And this understanding of development means we can track people in their natural growth process and know when new value systems come online and help them find the context where they can express those in a healthy way rather than have them burn out and leave the organization. Okay. And ultimately, it's, this is, as I kind of said earlier on, these value systems that are emerging in us because we're part of this planet. We're kind of part of nature. And we're sensing, like anything in nature does, that the ecology is changing. I mean, ecology in the broadest sense, right? The life conditions are shifting. And it's all getting beamed in to our phones. Everybody's kind of seeing this complexity. And when we face it, it enables these intelligences to emerge. So they're going to emerge in the individuals, whether we like it or not, right? And thank goodness, because those are the intelligences we need to deal with the challenges. The question is more whether our institutions and organizations can evolve to create the space that people with these value systems, the whole performers, are going to want to come and work. Right? And the organizations that can attract the whole performers are the ones that will survive and thrive into the future because they've got the intelligences, the complexity, right, to deal with the speed of change and everything that's going on. The ones that don't are likely to fall away because everything will have evolved and they won't have evolved with it. So Darwin's survival of the fittest, not survival of the strongest, survival of the ones that fit best in their evolving ecology. Evolve or die. So, this is me many moons ago with Don Beck, who was the guy who kind of developed the spiral dynamics, and he worked closely with Nelson Mandela and de Klerk in South Africa during the transition out of apartheid. And this is my favorite quote from him. He says, "No more prizes for predicting the rain. We know the rain's coming. Only prizes for building the arcs." The question is, and I'm going to finish with this little poem from my brother, are you ready? Are you ready to let go of this 20,000-year eddy, which we know is just an undertow? We be tuning into the real flow, here, now. You can't compute the impact of this EBEF Institute. It's like taking off the mute on the voice of life, stepping onto the edge of the knife, a slice of how humans might be. Can you see what we've done? Can you see what we have begun? This, the form which holds the storm. We feel the creature of learning, burning. Invite the world in. It ain't no sin. She's turning at 40,000 miles an hour. That's a fact. That's power. The Big Bang rang, sang, echoing onto the mount, a blast from the past. At last, too much to count the years of evolution, the earth, the human suffering and compassion, because we're booming. That's a fusion of chaos and confusion away from the illusion of wealth. Our revolution is coming with stealth. Can you see what we've done? Can you see what we have begun? Do we dare to share the future of how humans might be? Do we dare to be free? Do I dare to be me? To be fully human, love confusion and drop the illusion? Now we're booming. Do we dare to step into the places we most fear? Become clear, find a community, true to me. I'm not being cute. There's no parachute. We already jumped out the plane. Do we dare to become sane again? This ain't about brain. It's about living the future now. Yes is the answer to how. And we moving, we grooving. But stop. Listen to me. Can you see what we've done? Can you see what we have begun? My sisters and brothers from other mothers, we are the ones where the ocean meets the shore. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Lovely, thank you. We got some time for some kind of discussion, right? And questions and things. And Lydia and Sergio can join us. And maybe at the end we'll talk about some of the possible follow-up options. Yeah, great. Do you want to how about why don't you take a moment to turn to your neighbor and just process a little bit with them. Let's take just 2 or 3 minutes so that you don't have to sit there and we just take one question or another question. How did it land for you? What insights did it generate? What questions did it throw up? Just discuss for a little bit first, and then we'll see what questions emerge from that. Okay?
Can I start with you? Okay, I'll do that.
And then we'll come to the questions. Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Me convidaram para falar sobre cenários de futuro. Veio uma pessoa técnica e veio eu como pessoa que faz desenvolvimento humano. E a hora que eles ouviram novos humanos, consciências e essa parte toda integrativa, eles pediram para eu estava com o pessoal da Future Brand, da Spring Point, pedindo para eu aprofundar. Era um capítulo do meu livro e virou uma pesquisa inteira que chegou no segundo livro. Mas tem tudo a ver com você. Foi lá que começou. Eles precisam.
Was good. Something new. Although I was talking to Ligia, some of the ideas you were talking about are exactly the same ones we are discussing boards of directors. How to integrate more, how to listen more, how to cooperate better for the take decisions, listen to everybody, be more sensitive to people. A lot of the basic things. It's a natural evolution. Exactly.
That's when you can see the map.
Get there. Exactly.
Yeah. Having the map gives it a place.
I haven't seen all, as you put here, it's more a bigger picture.
Yeah.
But lots of the pieces, you have organized that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the pieces, I have seen them.
It helps to see it in a context.
And how you get there.
Yeah. And then it's kind of okay. This is natural. It's a natural journey.
Company that you are trying to do this in on a practical terms. Is there a testing environment?
Actually, I applied this in IBM. Actually, applied this in benefits. 2-year process. At the end of which we had triple-digit growth and 97% employees satisfaction.
When you speak about numbers, they are wow.
I'll start with that.
So already prepared. I think simple the one.
It's a framework of education and
And when you've got the map, that's not hard.
Everything is culture. I still don't want to culture. You reach it there size and also in the for the changes there's always resistance.
What the map gives you is an understanding of why certain people are likely to resist certain approaches.
Yes.
Because the different value systems respond
Exactly.
differently to forms of communication. And then it's kind of, okay, this for these people, this for
Yes,
these people,
exactly.
that for
Then you
those
have to
people.
understand and map this and do communication plan according to this to reach most of the people. But it's at least for me, it's not an easy task.
It just requires being able to see it clearly.
Yeah.
Because if you try like one approach and you've got all these different value systems,
It's
yeah.
That's a gap.
And one important point, Sergio, it's very important to identify the integral self, the yellow leaders in your company. That's very key. Because it takes years to develop the green, the sensitive self. For this moment right now, who are the yellows? Who are the integral
I
self?
was comparing myself with that. At the same time we were speaking, I say I can do some yellow, but it's still on the
Under construction.
under construction.
Yeah, beautiful.
I think we can.
Yeah, let's
Hi guys. Oi? Tá, mas eu não sei se vai dar. Hi guys. Can you wrap up? It was good the discussion you had. So I'll turn back to Peter then.
So Sergio Q jumped and he got a question in before anybody else could get a question in. And he said it would be good to share my answer up front, which was, has this been applied anywhere? And actually the kind of first time I really tested this out was with, for those who are from IBM will know business continuity and resiliency services. So this is BCRS in Benelux. And we basically applied this whole approach with the spiral to understand, what the gap was. Classically, it was people experienced the culture as red, which is this power-driven thing, and they wanted more green and yellow. So the difference between, the stepping from red to orange and green is blue, right? The structure, the clarity, the roles, and everything else. Anyway, so we used that to implement a change process over a couple of years, at the end of which there was triple-digit growth and 97% employee satisfaction in the business unit. And so the head of HR comes knocking on the door, right? He's like, "What have you been doing?" And so I explain, but this is kind of an engineering company, right? So they're, "Oh, okay, well, where's the kind of map of what you did?" And I said, "No, listen, what you need to understand is that we were applying a certain set of principles. And we took one step, and then we sensed what was happening, and then we designed the next step. And we did that, and then we sensed the next step. We didn't plan a linear process. It was emergent, one step at a time. But of course, when an engineering mind, even if they're in HR, sees a bunch of steps and sees 97% employee satisfaction and triple-digit growth, he's like, oh, copy-paste this and roll it out across the company. And I said, that won't work. Of course, they tried and it failed. Because they didn't implement it with the core principles, right? Which was, you need to take a step and then you need to sense what's happening in the culture of the unit and then work out what the step after that is. So it becomes a more emergent process. So anyway, but it has been, and I'm not the only one, to apply this. Has been applied in many other contexts. And saying to Sergio, it's just once you've got the map, right, you can see the terrain more clearly. And so you understand what kind of communication is going to work for which kind of people. I'll just tell you another story on the application of this. Was that we were sitting with the management team of the business unit. So BCRS, a lot of what they do is they just deliver data tapes back and forth, right, between IBM and the client company. And the management team had this beautiful green, and they just learned about self-organizing teams. They were like, cool, we should implement self-organizing teams in the business unit. And they were complaining to me in one of the sessions. They were saying, we're trying to introduce self-organizing teams, and they keep coming to me, and they keep asking me to tell them what to do. I said, well, do some self-organization. No, just tell me what to do. And I said, okay, they're delivering tapes back and forth between IBM and the client company. What value system best supports that function? And they were spiral literate at that point, and they kind of sat back and went, yeah, blue, I suppose. You know, it's just you do the same thing. You need to follow the rules, same processes the whole time. Don't deviate, no creativity, you know, just get it done and follow the rules. I said, blue, that's right. So what kind of leadership do they need? Oh yeah, blue. Yeah, so they need to be told what to do. They need structure, rules, organization, reward, punishment. You know, no green self-organizing teams. So they took, you know, a deep breath, and it was basically, so either you need to get comfortable with your own blue order-driven value system so you can lead them in a way that best serves them and the function they have to perform, or you need to go and lead somewhere else. So it's about that. It's not about getting everybody to yellow, right? What yellow looks to do is to create a functional fit. Right? Don Beck used to call it spiral wizardry, where you can move up and down the spiral and find the appropriate value system for the appropriate function. I call it, in evolutionary leadership book, I call it natural design. The natural fit between the functions that need to be performed, the value system that best supports that function. So let's say blue is great for accounting, because you want people to follow the rules. You don't want any orange creativity going on, right, in your accounting department. And then you've got, in marketing though, you want fantastic orange, right, achiever self-energy. In HR, you want beautiful green, because it's all about the people. And you can literally create the habitats. This is the fun bit. You can design the habitats in the business units to best support those value systems and those functions. So when you walk into accounting, everything's got to be clean, structured, ordered, right? And it kind of feels like everything's very clear. When you walk into marketing, you know, there should be all numbers on the wall. You know, what are our sales figures up to this? By the way, when we went to Link the other day, you walk in, I don't know if you know Link, the university, right? You walk into the hall at Link, and on the walls, this is the amount of money that our students have raised. You know,
have
for
the
their
coordinator here.
Oh yeah, you've got some Link. Oh yeah, right, from Link, yeah. And so it's this beautiful expression of orange, and it's all about startups, right? And then you walk into HR, and there should be sofas and plants and, you know, soft music or whatever in the background. You see, you can create the habitats to support the value systems that best support the different functions. That's kind of yellow integral design, as it were, as an example. So
Beautiful.
Anyway.
And Sergio also asked how we started all this in Brazil. Like New Humans is our part of the business and trainment that talks with all this whole performer. And it started in a board of counseling for a big bank here in Brazil. I was called to be there as an invited counseling, and the vice presidents and the president there, they got very shocked with all this information about, okay, nobody is going to say that AI, everybody's going to say that AI is going to change the future of work, consumption, leadership, and organizations. But there is a blind spot. This new consciousness that sometimes we just put at the Gen Z, we call new consciousness as innovation, which is all about this green, yellow value systems. They are demanding innovation as well, in name of diversity programs. We name this equality leadership. We name this like mental health programs. All those demands come from this kind of consciousness. And then what was a chapter of my book, New Humans, become a 2 years research. Have been like talking to many leaders. And for me and Tanya, to keep up the next 2 years of the research, we are very interested in the yellows. We need to know, because it takes time to develop this sensitive brain. So our next step of the research, if you find yourself in yellow, we need reference. The market needs reference. That's our work nowadays. So if you are a yellow leader and you have this impact in your organization, we want to know you. We need to deep down the research and the educational programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I have some good, some bad news. The good news that we had 3 questions. The bad news that I already asked it to. Just kidding. Is that so? Let's try 2 more questions. two more questions. João has asked you
Very
for
quick comment, Peter. And we've been thinking about a executive program here, and sponsored by EBF now with somebody or institution that can help us with that one. And I was surprised because in my mind we should be talking about subjects like this one here, because that's for me is the present future. Now we learn how we should lead, and we interviewed with some of the experts. We thought they are experts, and they should. And they were talking to us that the curriculum of that program should be the things that we've been hearing, like technology and I don't know, other things that are common subjects. And I was insisting, guys, you know what? The way we're going to be leading these companies or our own life is going to be completely different. We just didn't realize that. So I'm very happy to hear what I've heard here today, because it goes in line with what I think we should be talking about. No? But I think we have a long time yet to get people aware of these things, and then start thinking about it, studying, getting educated, and then practicing. You know what I mean? So that's my point.
Well, I mean, remember, this is a natural evolution. So when Sergio said to me, these are the conversations that we're having in the boards now, is about how to listen more and all. That's the natural evolution of green. Right? I think the key message to the companies is, remember that the whole performer has got the capacity to deal with more complexity. They will outperform high performers. So if you need them in your company, first of all, you need to keep the ones that are in your company now, which means you've got to make the space for that, for the green to evolve. But if you're going to attract the generations, who already have those value systems, you're going to have to change your culture and your reward systems and structures as well, to actually create a context that they want to come into. But the business case basically is, these people will be far more effective in your company than the pure orange high performer. And but to get them in there, you're going to have to shift the organizational culture and structures. So people should be running after those people. We should be wanting to get the whole performers into the company, but they often don't understand the evolutionary context, right? That actually it's a next step. It's not a regression because people are starting to talk about their emotions or wanting to build relationships. It's actually a more complex, it's a next stage of development that brings in more complexity and more capacity. Just that people who aren't comfortable with it, maybe it's I could say maybe the men find it a little bit harder as well in that context. It's uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable. And yet if you can place it in a map, you see orange, this is one of the tricks you can use. Orange likes to be the best. If you can show them that, this is what I said on CNBC this morning, it's like high performers is 2 stages above high performer. And the next stage, is the sensitive self. It's above. Better, no, I didn't say better than. It's above high performer. It's the next stage. So if orange can start to see, oh wow, we need to kind of really start to develop this, and maybe I'm already a whole performer, actually. But that's, you can use the kind of value system code, as it were.
We have space for one more question due to time restriction. Mayra, raise your hand, please.
I understand what you explained about being yellow and being a leader of other colors and having to adapt. Makes sense. But what do you suggest in a hypothetical situation where a middle management person is yellow, but the upper management is orange? How do you deal up?
Good question.
Hypothetical. It's hypothetical.
Purely hypothetical.
Yes.
Just
an example.
Well, the key thing to remember is that yellow can manage orange because it's already been there itself. Right? So yellow knows how to play the orange game and to value it. Problem is orange can't see yellow, right? Because it hasn't developed that complexity yet. So it should actually be, they might not like doing it, but if it can see the context, right, and play the game, then it knows what orange needs. And nobody's saying orange high performer is bad, right? It's got really important a contribution to make. It's just that it's inadequate. It's not enough to be able to deal with the complexity. But yellow can play the game. Yellow's very good at playing, and it plays the game because it doesn't really care. What it cares about is impact. It's like, I need to be orange for a bit to achieve this goal. I'll be orange. I need to play green, to get HR on side, whatever. I'll play green, because it doesn't care. It's like, we need to make this change, and I'll do whatever needs to be done to achieve it, basically. Yeah.
And is not faking, it's making. Because there is this whole part of the sensitive self, which means when you have develop the emotional intelligence, it means you did a good homework in your inner sense. So it's really making, it's authentic. So there is a level of complexity. That's why for us, it's so important to know the yellow, because it takes some time to do this inner work and this level of maturity. As researcher and educators in corporate world, we are very interested to know the yellows.
I think we are ready.
One more. One sec, because the people online won't be able to hear you without a microphone. We're burning through the microphone.
I have some curiosity because you talk a lot about the yellow, but you don't talk for holistic self. What happened when the yellow go to holistic self?
Okay. Yeah, we're going to keep you waiting for that one now, because you asked. Because you asked, I owe you an answer, right? Because you asked. So the main difference between yellow integral self, well, let's say yellow, basically what happens is yellow is desperate to understand the whole picture and pull all the pieces of the puzzle together, right? But at some point it realizes it's so complex that you just can't fathom it with your rational mind. It's too much for the rational mind. So yellow reaches a point of surrender, where it's kind of, we can't map the whole system. It's way too complex, right? We have to develop a different kind of sensing of the whole. And it realizes it can't do that from the rational mind. This is where turquoise comes in. And so turquoise basically develops the capacity to sense the whole, which is different to understanding the whole, right? And it's much more of a feeling thing. It's much more intuition-based. And it starts to realize that, wow, this whole thing is actually all deeply interconnected at a level that we can't really understand, that there's actually an element of mystery to this whole reality. And realizes that also you can't kind of plan the whole, because you can't understand the whole system, you therefore can't plan the whole way forward. All you can really do is sense what's true now and take the next step, gather the data, and then take the step afterwards. That's all you can do. It's right. It's about really being present, because the more present you are, the more you have a sense of what's going on. And what green has done is has helped you develop that kind of inner space. And it's when you drop into that quality of presence that you notice you have a kind of intention as to where you're going, but you understand that you don't need to come up with the plan yourself. If you have a clear intention, life will actually start to organize itself to help you deliver that intention in ways that you could never have planned yourself, because it's There's way more out there than you can actually understand with your mind. And so that's where synchronicity, you know Joseph Jaworski's work on synchronicity comes in, intuition, those kind of senses that are much more right brain or maybe whole brain, we should say. And remarkably in turquoise, it becomes a lot simpler. Like a lot of the kind of complexity drops away, because the only thing that's true is the present moment. I mean, the past is just us thinking about something that happened in the past, in the present. The future is just us imagining something, but we're imagining it in the present. So when you kind of go, well, the only thing that really is like what's here now, then stuff starts to happen in ways that you couldn't plan yourself. So it's you'll notice it's hard for me to find the language because it's only just starting to emerge, as it were. But it's a much more intuitive way of leading. And part of actually this is a nice bridge to Broughton. Something I do on the side is have a little startup, something called Weird Technologies, which is developing consciousness technologies. This comes out of research at Princeton, and where they found that, because the fighter pilots they found, McDonnell Aircraft Company came to Princeton School of Engineering and said, seems like fighter pilots, when they get stressed, they're influencing the instruments on the dashboard of the fighter aircraft.
We do this too. My Mac always fail when I'm very stressed. So it's not just the pilot.
And to cut a long story short, that ended in 2007, we further developed the technology. We now have the technology that can read the field of the space in between us, like the quality of the relational field. So when a group comes into coherence and alignment, you see structure in the data that correlate with the experiences people are having in the room. And the box just sits there. It's not physically connected to anybody in any way. But it's scientific evidence that there is something in this space between us that actually can be measured. And our inner state is what affects that. And the more present we are and the more connected we are and the more aligned we are, the more structure you see in the data. So there's a whole, in the West Coast, on the Silicon Valley, they're starting to call it spirit tech. Us Brits call it consciousness technology. But this is what Lydia and Tanya and the New Humans team are pulling together a group to come to the UK, because every year we have a science and consciousness conference where we bring together the researchers in that area. It's where we have all the original Princeton technology. We actually kind of have that on loan in the north of England now, so you can interact with it. And we have the researchers and we have the practitioners, all of whom are kind of leaning into really what's the turquoise reality, the turquoise context. There's a lot more going on with our mind, as it were, and our being extends out into the field around us than we really understand. It feels like we're just scratching the surface of what's happening. So the technology we've developed feels a bit like a telescope. It's helping us peer into a dimension of reality that we've not really discovered or looked into before. But it's telling us something about reality that is challenging the materialist worldview, let's say, to put it lightly.
And it's amazing, the lab. We were there for a week last year in the summit, and Peter used to take people, like groups of 10 every lunch, to check the lab, because Princeton experience is there, like the little balls, you can influence the little balls like coming down, and then the pendle, and then I was there every lunch. Like it's beautiful to see science doing that part inside that castle I told you in the beginning. So it's all there,
The reason we're doing that, just to be clear, the reason is because after many years of trying to change the world, the conclusion that I've drawn is that the reason we're in the mess we're in is because we've forgotten the nature of our interconnectedness. We've just forgotten that we're actually deeply interconnected with each other and the rest of life on the planet. You know, the wisdom traditions all describe that, but the science is now actually demonstrating that. And the moment that you have that experience, that you're sitting there and suddenly you find yourself influencing a piece of technology that you're not connected to, it's kind of, whoa. You know, it makes the mind think differently about the nature of reality, but reminds us that there is some kind of connectedness going on here that we don't really understand. And turquoise is what, you know, that's the assumption. So yellow starts from the parts and tries to stitch them all together. Turquoise starts from the whole and kind of works with the parts that are within the whole. And it's a subtle distinction, but it's a very fundamental distinction. Yeah. And it's, you know, we can't say too much about it really because it's emerging. And if you try to grab it too early, you'll find we're defining it with an old mindset that doesn't do it justice. So, but thank you for asking. That's the best I can do at the moment. to
Peter,
try and
just to
describe it.
finish, like the other aha moment for us was taking like Peter's AI at one afternoon there, and we asked it to put Brazil data and bring in the value systems of color to our country. We did that to IBM Brazil too, Joka, because we have a lot of IBMers on the table, so we want to know. But for Brazil, we did it. And the turquoise, at the average, is 1% of the population and 1% in leadership. And yellow is 4% of the population and 4% in leadership, Brazil and worldwide. So there's a lot of work. And generations to come, because the generations come too. So it's beautiful time. That's why we are the ones we have been waiting for. The next 10, 20 years is us taking decisions with power and signatures to change some parts of the business to go to next generation with better base. I think that's the point.
I don't think what we actually said is, so I forgot to say, is that you and Tanya and Jenny are organizing a what you call it, a mission from Brazil to take a group to the Science and Consciousness event next year. So if you're interested in coming, it's end of last week of October, 26th to 30th of October, to have a kind of Brazilian delegation at Science and Consciousness and start to play with some of this turquoise technology and stuff. You know, we'd love to have you there. So it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to bring João back to finish up our meeting here.
You know one thing, Peter? I was clear in my mind that I'm not a high performer. And understanding better what is whole perform today, I conclude that I'm a no performer. You know? Yeah, I'm sorry. So guys, thank you very much for you guys here. So those over the internet now. So I know we had a lot of colleagues there, so great. Thank you, Peter, very much. You, Legion. So it's a pleasure. We're gonna make sure we're gonna bring you here again. Yes. So, you know one thing. I think Peter is already Brazilian because he was not concerned about time. You know. So yeah, yeah. So. Thank you, guys. So,
we need the CFOs because we need to bring him in Libras.
oh. Yeah. So this is something for you, Peter, to show our appreciation for you being here with us. So thank you, man.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thanks very much.
okay. It's not like those that you...
Cookies.
Yeah.
Oh, it's delicious. It's really good.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
But, you know, he lives in Amsterdam. I can tell you there are some delicious things like this also there. So... Hey, if you can put the QR code here, so for you guys here and also in the YouTube, if you can copy this QR code and provide us your feedback, this is really important for us. Okay? Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.